Broadcasting from with some of the biggest names in magic. Welcome to the Deceive Reality Podcast with your host and Steve Spade.
And we are live. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Deceive Reality Podcast. Thank you so much for being here again. And this week we are joined by the great Fraser Parker. Fraser, how are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for being
Thanks
here.
for being here, man.
So we are going to start with a cliche question, but with a little twist. So everyone always talks about how someone got into magic, but we'd like to hear your story about that, but also how you got into the Propless mentalism side of magic and that whole aspect.
Cool. Okay, great. Yeah. So like you say, this is sort of, a generic sort of question, and it's something I've answered quite a lot in the past. So I'll be fairly brief with this so that there's more room to get on to sort of hopefully more interesting stuff. So I was quite late into magic. I think I got serious around the age of 18, and I saw David Blaine on TV, and I'm sure that's how a lot of people my generation sort of first got into this. I thought seems really cool. He was just carrying a deck of cards and just making people freak out. So it's like, I wanted to be that cool person, which kind of wasn't necessarily the proper reason to get into magic, but it was after starting to look into magic that I got sort of deeper into the art and understanding the deeper sort of aspects of it. But I remember as a child, my dad bought the Mark Wilson's Complete Course of Magic, right? And that just sort of sat on the shelf. And we had always sort of watched not McDonald's, Paul Daniels on the yeah, looks nothing like it on the TV. And so Dad always sort of showed me stuff like that on TV, and he knew a little bit about sort of palming and different things, so he could sort of let me in a little bit on secrets, and I knew to look for misdirection and stuff like that. So although I didn't know exactly what was going on, I kind of already was starting to sort of have a disillusionment a little bit, like a disillusionment. But it was really when I picked up the book with the Mark Wilson's Course of Magic that the disillusionment really set in for me, because I remember reading the effect on one side of the page and reading it and thinking, oh, that sounds great, like real magic. And then you turn the page or go to the next page where you find what's typically labeled the method and how to do it, and I just remember thinking, well, that's not magic. It's like there's a hidden matchstick in a handkerchief, and you snap this one and it switches. And I thought, I don't want to have to carry, for one, I don't want to have to carry on napkins, for instance. and I remember another book that my girlfriend at the time got me from the library, and I remember thinking that's everything I hate about magic. Like, as I got later on into magic, it had like a thimble, it had like a length of rope, it had napkins, or so I kind of always had this desire to find real magic, right? If it existed. And as I got more into magic, I found who's my now mentor, Kenton Nepper. And when I read sort of ad copy of some of his things, because of like the association with some of what Darren Brown was doing on the TV, sort of multiple reality, dual reality type stuff, as well as the Luke Jamay connection, where he published Luke Jamay's first book. And not only this, Kenton had wonder words and different suggestion-based material. So it felt like if magic was to exist, real magic, then maybe it would be in the form of where words can shift perception and change reality. So it sort of started me off down that path, which became, ultimately me working in Propless and having this drive towards getting as close to real magic in terms of an ideal, and just using words and Propless material to get there. So that's sort of what started me off on the creative, in a creative sense. And I remember like, for instance, an illustration of this would be, I remember reading a Paul Harris effect, I think it was Overkill or something, and I remember thinking, like, conceptually it's great, but I tried to take out like the moves. So like I tried to take out one move, then another move, And in the end, I just ended up sitting there with a deck of cards, nothing moving, no physical compromise, and no magic. And I thought, I've got a real problem here, because because nothing's happening, right? But then I found ways to do things with words and stuff like that. And we can cover sort of, my full thoughts on Propless, and because since then I've come full circle in my thinking, and I do use physical, like classic methods as well, and physical based methods. And I feel like the two really support each other, classic methods and Propless, because they can create like a feedback, but we can get into that in a moment. So hopefully that kind of starts to answer it.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's nice to kind of like take the effect and then strip it all the way back that it becomes almost Propless. I mean, that's a cool premise for any effect, or any either stage or close-up effect, or whatever, for anyone to even try.
Right. I mean, it kind of, like, I'm aware that, that was like the reason I tell that story really is to kind of give you a sort of worst case in terms of, but something that you said is, that I agree with is the idea that you streamline stuff, right? So when I'm creating, I typically try to streamline as much as possible and get to sort of the simplest, most elegant solution. And in the past, like I think Anneman, like great mentalist from the past, his work's great. I think he said, get to the effect by any means, right? And I kind of, so that would mean, using physical method as well, right? But I kind of always find myself trying to push towards the ideal that I had, early on, which would be the Propless approach. So although I do use physical stuff as well, like I've got certain peak methods and different things that I do, but I'm always pushing towards that ideal. And I suppose the sort of the transition period was when I started to create stuff. I remember thinking, I either want to eventually be able to earn enough money to afford Kenton's work, or to, maybe have him teach me it somehow, or to try to work out my own ways to do it, or work out how he did it. So that kind of started me off thinking creatively in terms of, on my own. And I just assumed that would be possible. I didn't really doubt it. I just thought, that's right for me. Like I felt like a drive or a need to create, and so that's kind of what I did. And it feels like my whole magic career has sort of followed this sort of strange, like this path. I feel like, and Kenton says this, like real magic will support people who are serious about magic. And it feels like everything that I've kind of wanted to do in my career has sort of happened, but it's because I think that I had like this belief, almost as if it had already happened. It's like, it's meant to be, and it will happen. Maybe I could have, sped the process up in the early days a little bit, because it seemed to take a long time. But like for instance, my first book, I thought, it'd be great if it would be compared to sort of 7 Deceptions, and then Kenton, without any prompting whatsoever, put in quotes the next Luke Jamay, sort of implying that this book was gonna be sort of like, as sort of groundbreaking. So that was really nice, because that was like a wish I had. Another thing was I thought, I wonder what it's like to be in Kenton's school. So he takes on members and he's got students nowadays, but in the past it was kind of a more select group of a few students, and I wondered what it would be like to be a member. And so I asked him one day, and then he says that students tend to show up. So that's another thing that came true. And just throughout my career, it feels like I've been on a path, and meeting the right people, such as Peter Turner, Michael Murray, and a few others, Ross Taylor, Ross Bartels. It just feels like it's sort of meant to be, So I know I've gone off on a massive wild tangent, but my point was the transition, right? So I started off creating in kind of like pseudo hypnosis stuff, right? So my first release was True Mysteries, which was the apparent ability to create hypnotic feats, but without any hypnosis or induction. So for me, it's not hypnosis, although if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and acts like a duck, then it probably may as well be. And Anthony Jacquin, and a great hypnotist, he said, I think like I'd found like another way in, almost like another way to do it. And I know that he uses like an imagination model as well, which was similar to some of my earlier thinking. So that's kind of how I started, and I don't know why I sort of leant towards the influence stuff. It was probably Kenton's influence, because he's got a lot of stuff like that. And then it feels like that kind of that kind of overall like discovery about illusion kind of has a thread throughout all of my work, and it sort of started me off like that, and then I started to get into how can I create feats of mind reading. So I moved away from the influence stuff, but True Mysteries, I realized that it was how I was acting essentially. So it was how what I did appeared outwardly that convinced everyone that what was happening was real magic or real influence. So I was literally creating the illusion by just acting as if what I was doing was so, or real, you know. And I think that thread kind of goes throughout all of my work, because it's kind of the credibility and believability in performance that allows you to get away with some of the more bolder technique that I use and stuff like this. But essentially, in my mind, it's all based on perception and how the audience perceive what it is you're doing, and to be able to create moments of magic like that, where the like illusion becomes full circle and it just appears like what you're doing is magic, for me is one of the purest ways or forms to that magic.
Yeah.
You know,
Definitely. When you're doing something like that, I think, as you're saying, the confidence of just this is going to work will make it work. If you've any self-doubt, it's like even suggestibility tests from a hypnosis point of view. That's a form of hypnosis. But if you go, oh, this may work, it's not going to. You have to go, oh yeah, your fingers will close. Then they do. But when you're coming up with the Propless stuff, I think we all have like tricks where you have a sleight of hand that you might practice in the mirror, whether it be a peak or whatever. When you're coming up with a Propless idea, you need people to test it on, really. So how do you go around that whole like making sure this is actually a trick and not something that people will just go, oh yeah, cool, that was obvious.
Right. Okay. So what tends to happen is, I mean, I perform a lot socially, you know, so I'm constantly able to try stuff out, and you know, or before the pandemic anyway. And but a lot of the time, I think because I'm sort of building on it's almost like building blocks and foundations. So I kind of, obviously, if something's new, then it, you know, it needs testing. But a lot of the time, I've got a sort of sense as to what's going to work based on some of what I've done in the past. And you know, I imagine it playing out. So when I'm writing scripts, I basically, you know, I'm saying it to myself, like, and sometimes it's all day long. I'm just doing that and refining the script and changing things, you know, and I'm kind of I'm imagining it playing out. So I suppose even that is part of it, you know, you know, I'm getting a sense of how it's coming across for myself, you know, just how it would an audience, because that's the only way, like, I know how to fool someone, or how I'm going to be able to fool them is if I can shift their perception in the right way, you know, or make them see it in a certain way. So I tend to write scripts the way I speak, and it has to feel like really fit me and feel like it's something that I can easily say, because then I can go out and just do it. You know, and you realize where the kinks are in the script. You realize where something seems like lengthy process or something like that. So I mean, one of the criticisms with Propless work in general, and sometimes aimed at me, is that these methods, you know, take too long, but they really don't. That's something that I'm really conscientious of when I'm creating, and I've got, you know, like you know, in the past few years, that's like the effects, they take sometimes less time than it would do like a billet routine to have someone write something down. And you know, and another thing that right from the start I felt was it's almost like a signature or a thread throughout my work again, is that the method and effect tend to run along similar lines, like parallel lines. So when I'm scripting, typically the method like is the script. So I've kind of got a built-in script and a built-in presentation. Obviously you have to like justify things in a theatrical way, and you can flower that up. But when I teach and write these things up, I typically keep it really bare bones, because that's how I prefer to perform. And it's my intention that, you know, other performers will add on their own presentations where they want, and sometimes different justifications. But what I love about sort of my approach is that the method and the scripting, because that is the method, it kind of handles the theatrical, you know, because I'm thinking about that at the same time, and they kind of work together. Like for instance, some of the influence stuff from the past, like if I had it just flat out fail with like one person, they would sometimes say to me, well, how would that work anyway? That would be real, you know. But then 90% of the time it goes through, and they're convinced that what you're doing is something, you know, whether they think of it as influence or whatever they because I tend to leave my sort of theatrical, like the skill base, open-ended. I prefer the aesthetic of like a psychic psychic entertainer. So I don't claim to be psychic, but I leave it up to them. And if pushed, I might sort of talk about how, you know, words are shifting perception and stuff. So what's great is my silent script has kind of been taken care of for itself, because I am doing what I sort of claim to be doing, right? Like my approach is what it is, right? And I think that the audiences feel the difference when I perform in this way, and it helps bolster the rest of the material that I do when I combine this with more classic stuff as well.
I think that's why people like in mentalism, a lot of times the method is done before the trick really starts, is like the cliche. So then when you're doing Propless and the method continues for so long, people think it takes so long because they're used to, but they forget that like to write something down, put it in an envelope, put it in another envelope, and in a box, like that takes forever.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Like if you've like say there's nothing wrong with gimmicks, for instance, but say like you say, like the trick is, let's say you've got a self-working trick, right? Now it's presentation, so that's great, right? But I love the fact that like it sort of takes care of itself, right? It's happening at the same time. So it's not like I'm having to, like, I mean, I am lying, like I am creating deceptive, you know, ruses and being deceptive, but it feels just a bit closer to sort of what it is that I'm claiming to be doing.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's a great way of thinking, because there's so much, you know, magicians, you know, starting off, they'll just buy a trick and then they'll just do the pattern word for word, doesn't matter whose trick it is or whatever. But with Propless, you're kind of out in the trenches, you know, you're kind of out there with nothing. So unless you know exactly what you're going to say, you can't really just kind of ad-lib it. You can probably ad-lib it when you become proficient in it, but like up to that point, you need to know exactly what you're going to do.
Right. I mean, I have a script, and the good thing about that is I can come off it. You know, you'll know from performing that, you know, something will happen, and then you know to get back. But it's kind of like some of it is, it's an approach and it's an attitude, I think. And I always misquote Anneman, but I think he talks about mentalism in general as needing a certain amount of arrogance, but I don't think he meant arrogance, because that's too negative a connotation. But it was kind of this almost like a forceful sort of nature in terms of the structure of like the theatric, you know, what you're doing theatrically. So it doesn't mean be mean to the audience or anything like that, but if you don't have the confidence and the sort of you know, ability to, if you see the spectator sort of drifting off slightly, just to like bring their attention back by just sort of like touch them on the elbow or wherever is appropriate, just look and just say, you know, look at me, or sometimes saying, you know, take a deep breath in and let it out if you really need to get that focus back. So some people have sort of struggled using some of my material before, but I think again it's just like everything else. You need to practice it, and you need to like the first time I did a double lift, I got caught and I was terrible at it. It was only when it became subconscious and just in me that I didn't have the magician's guilt, and I had the right technique to just do it, So all of this comes into play as well. So I think that it's just as viable a method because, and this is something that Pete's talked about in the past before, it's probably a better label to call what I do psychomechanical, because it's still mechanical, just the same as sort of, like a Charlie cut has mechanics to it. I'm moving things around, but the difference is it's happening in their minds and it's happening with words. So for me, I would say 90% success rate, purely because nothing is 100%, right? And the more you get better at it and more confident with it, you can get things to play out. I've done like 40 minutes before with nothing, I'm not saying that that's, that you should do that, because like I said before, I combine the two, the classic methods as well as the propless within sets and within when I go out and work. And I think one of the reasons for that, why that's important, is because you don't have to fear any failure now, because you're always going to have solid things in the set that are gonna round off the performance and make it look like you've done a good performance. But I don't think there's anything wrong, and you shouldn't fear failure as well. Obviously, you don't want to be failing more than once in a set. I give myself one failure, and then I'll just stop doing the proper stuff, right? Or I might carry on. Like, it depends how I feel. That's not to say that you won't have sets where everything just goes great. But I think why it doesn't matter is because theatrically it actually breeds credibility upon what it is you're doing. Because if you were, if this was just a trick, then they'd expect it to work every time. Whereas if perhaps what you're doing is closer to real, then you would expect, to only sometimes be close with the name, or, or sometimes to just miss outright, and it all depends how you address that theatrically. So if you plan on that just the same way you would anything that you're presenting, then it's not that you're shocked and, oh, something's gone wrong, and then that becomes this like elephant in the room, or this problem. It's theatrically, you can say, sometimes I can't get this, or and that plays into the story and the character, and that one thing, if you do like another 4 or 5 things that just blow them away, including using propless as well, then I think you're fine. I think it breeds credibility. So it's not something I worry about failure at all, but I know that some people are, are sort of like, that's put them off propless in the past. Because it's they think that it's unreliable, but for me, I can make this stuff work, and it's really powerful because you are literally doing what you say you're doing.
I think people, when they're like, because they buy a book or something where you've written up the script, and they'll go and say your script, and as you said, you wrote the script because that's how you speak, and if the person doesn't speak with the same cadence or word structures it's not going to suit them, and the audience will be able to tell that they're not being genuine, and as they're saying, that will kill your credibility immediately. So do you encourage people to like tweak words and phrases to be more like themselves?
I kind of assume that would happen, because another thing that I do is I teach I teach what needs to be in there, and magic secrets, they don't, like, they probably shouldn't be as easy. Like, I think I expect them to bring their own like stuff to that, and so they can tailor it to how they speak. Sometimes in a different language as well, changes things. But what is important though is that they follow the structure and understand why. What is happening conceptually to make this work, right? And if you, like, one friend of mine, he like sent me a video of him performing the new name guess, and he had missed out like a whole important like section, but got away with it. And I'm thinking, well, it's in the book, and I tell people to reread the book as well. And that's not, I don't want to sound arrogant or anything, but that's because it's just my writing style, right? So sometimes I might mention something like with one line, and then I might build on something that's happened somewhere else in the book, and it all plays off each other. So it behoves people, and it's helpful to read things a few times of mine, as well, because I might only say it once somewhere, but for me it's in there, and it's a magic secret, and it probably shouldn't be that easy, right? Like, you have to work a little bit to get there. So yeah, as long as you know the structure and the reason why things are happening, and in specific orders as well, because that's really the mechanical part of what's making it work, as well as your attitude. And I think maybe in the past, I haven't talked enough about sort of attitude and stuff like that. I tried to put some of this on video, and it's something that I intend to do is put all of my work on video, and I'm just slowly stockpiling stuff. So some people will get some of that for free because they already invested in the Book of Angels, which I said that I'd put video content with that, and just never, like, one thing led to the other. Each time I get caught up in different projects, and before you know it, you've sort of moved away from you're caught up in trying to earn money and do the rest of it. So that was kind of that was promised to people. So I'm hopefully going to fulfill that over the next year by just recording everything.
Excellent.
So yeah.
We had a question come in there actually from Nicholas, who said, just saying hi. So he was just wondering, is it casual or performance or structure performance? Which one do you prefer?
It's like I just focus on casual, like close-up performances essentially, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I have like helped people on stage with a few things, but for me it's a different sort of approach. I think you could build this stuff into stage, and it'd be really good. But again, you still want things that are considered like more solid, I suppose, to have this sort of complementing and working with that. So yeah, you can do that, but I wouldn't just go out with nothing for like 40 minutes on stage,
Give it a go. Like, what's the worst that can happen,
Right.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
With the kind of weaving it in between the classics. I mean, that's a great way of putting it. I mean, like,
right.
You're putting in, and if they hit, you've got miracles, then you can build on them, and then and like you said, kind of not being scared of a little bit of failure will only kind of heighten the performance for everyone.
Yeah. But the fact that I'm addressing failure, I don't want it to sound like this stuff isn't reliable, because it is, right? Like, for me, I know that it's reliable. But it's just
everybody misreads marks all the time. Marked cards should be the easiest thing in the world. You look at an 8, right, you think 6. It happens.
I mean, you could argue it the other way as well, because in a show, I did a wedding once, and it was towards the end of the night. I gave like a reading to this girl, and then later on, the boyfriend grabbed me. Oh, show me something. So I used a billet, like Acidus, and there's nothing on it when I go to peak. So I just did Rose and nailed him. And he's like, and I says, be honest with me, I feel like you're the type of person that wouldn't have even written anything because you think that I'm somehow looking at it. And that just blew, So it's actually saved me. So it can work the other way as well,
Definitely.
It's nice. It's good, solid foundations to have with your mentalism. I suppose it gives the impression of that kind of master mentalist. Like, if you are a mentalist, you shouldn't have anything. In the same way, if you're a magician, it shouldn't be, oh, what trick do I have on me? You should just be able to perform magic. That's the difference between, a working magician and an amateur or semi-professional.
Right. And I mean, back to sort of like the approach a little bit. It's kind of like, I know that it fits my style, but people can tailor it to them, and hopefully it's the approach that people like, and the concepts behind the new principles that I'm trying to find. And another thing, like, real quick, that I've been criticized with is it seems like I just release one star sign after the other, or one name guess after the other, and it's kind of for me that they're kind of vehicles for certain new or interesting principles, but because it's always been name guesses before is because I've always tried to like for me in Propless, right? The ultimate or the ideal would be a billetless billet peak, right? So like a mental peak. So I thought, well, how would you do that? And because words are made up of the alphabet and letters in the alphabet, I thought, well, it would probably be something to do with getting letters, right? So all of my approaches in the past have dealt with the alphabet and getting letters. And I could only really get one, maybe two letters in the past, which was fine for name guesses. In my culture, you know, if they're thinking of a male name, and there's a way to sort of lead them towards a male with the confirmation principle. So, for instance, I could say, so recently I feel you've had a few different people in your mind. There's females and males, but there's one male person that's beginning to stand out to me. This person's been on your mind recently. Can you think of who this is? You know, so that's like a Pete Turner idea. It's called confirmation principle, and it's an aspect of Kenton's confirmation principle as well. So what that does is now, instead of saying think of a male name, you've made it look like you're picking up on that thought, right?
Yeah.
Or that person, I should say. So what's cool about that is, right, you can get them to a male name. So typically I would find it easier to guess male names. But so this, like, you know, the vehicle would be, you know, a name guess for this new principle, because it was a way, like an accomplished way to present a certain principle or method. But it just looked like, and star signs as well, they lend themselves to, like, I don't know if I became obsessed with them or what happened, but because they just lend themselves to so many different sort of variations and ways in to get them, because there's like 4 seasons, you know, they group into elements and different things. So it's something that I've explored in great detail, you know, and so that kind of became a thing. But each of the releases has like a principle or something, or a tool or a way into it that hopefully is interesting. So it's not just, you know, oh, it's the same thing, you know. But having said that, I mean, recently, so what happened recently, I've released this it's not limited, actually. It's I've released this what I think is like my best work so far, because it's something that I've searched for years, you know, and that's sui generis. So it's any word sort of Propless thing, and this allows you to get obscure names, you know, like male, female. It could be really obscure. I remember when I first tried it with my girlfriend, she gave me she gives me characteristics that she associates with this person. So I think it was narcissistic and lapsidaisical. And even though she had spelt lapsidaisical wrong in her head, it's you know, I got like a slightly longer cups without nailing down on the letters. I just instantly said Penelope, and it was right. And you know, I don't know any, and I just like, you know, I was like smiling and just like, wow, I think this is something special, because. And I'm not saying that to be self-serving, because I feel like I discover these things, you know, and so I'm just as excited about them as hopefully others are when I share what I've discovered. So for me, that was kind of, it's like a game changer, because it's but that's what I've been searching for all this time, right? And I've been able to get letters, but this happens in such a way now, and it's so structured that it opens up, you know, really obscure things to the point where you can guess objects that people are thinking of, you know, animals, countries, and different things. I think I sent you a video of that.
I'll
You don't have to play it just yet, but
yeah, I'll get it.
Yeah,
ready.
if you want to see it working.
Yeah, I've got it here.
So hopefully this just highlights sort of my approach and the fact that it's quite conversational for anyone who hasn't seen me do Propless.
Yeah, cool. I have this here now, so I'll just play that.
So can you think who this is without saying the name?
Yeah.
So is this like someone close to you? It's someone that's been on your mind recently, right? So what I want you to do is just say this name to yourself over and over. So just repeat this name to yourself in your mind over and over. And as you're doing this, I want you to just allow a letter to just stand out from somewhere within this name. And when you've got this letter, just use it to create a characteristic or trait that begins with this letter that you feel might sum this person up in some way. And if you struggle to get a characteristic, then just a random word and say this out loud. Okay, cool. So now focus on the first letter of the name, and the reason I'm getting you to do this is so that these characteristics come from your subconscious mind. So just focus on the first letter of the name, and now I want you to create a characteristic or word that has that first letter from the name somewhere within this new word. So make this a fairly long or interesting word, and take your time to do this. Obviously don't go for the very first or last letter, and then when you've got something, just say this out loud. Make it fairly long and interesting. Okay, cool. So I don't feel like we can just be summed up by a few characteristics or traits. And whilst you've been sat in front of me, I've had sort of different impressions hit me. So just focus on the name. Can you count the amount of letters in this name, just in your mind?
Yeah.
So this is 5 letters?
Yeah.
This is Sarah, right?
Yeah.
Cool, man, yeah?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's very clean.
So yeah, that's kind of the structure. It allows it.
Sometimes you don't need that big shock applause. You know, it's just that stillness that kind of like, can't believe you got that. You know, I didn't write anything down, and all those things that magicians say, you're really doing.
Right. I mean, we call that anti-Tadar. If you don't get like a big, wow reaction, it's typically because like the strength of the magic sort of makes them go inward a little bit, kind of like the almost like a shock sort of response. So that's one thing you have to sort of get used to sometimes as a mentalist, is kind of just sort of stunned silence as well, which is pretty cool. But like I said before, you can see that that's just as quick, if not quicker, than using a billet, right? And I would typically in performance give like a reading surrounding the person they're thinking of, and or I sometimes use this thing, I think I call it cheat reading or something like that, shortcut reading, where I just say, whilst you've been sat in front of me, I've had different impressions hit me, and based on all of these things, and so I just claim that I've had impressions hit me. I don't have to actually tell them, so I never risk being wrong in a reading. If I want to speed a routine up that has this overall sort of that fits into the context of this like reading conversational style, with the psychic entertainer esque sort of feel to it. So if you don't want to give a reading, you can do that. And what's nice is, again, this is Kantner's confirmation principle. When you nail the information correctly, it feeds back, and it means it indirectly suggests that you must have been right about whatever impressions you had going on, because otherwise you wouldn't have got the name. Like, it's a sort of false logic thing that happens in the head, but that bridges it and makes them both play off each other. So it makes again, it comes full circle. It looks like what you claim to be doing is, or what you outwardly appear to be doing, is what you're doing. So that's really cool.
If you
so
reveal a name faster than that as well, you're not doing mentalism right. Like that's like a minimum how long a name reveal should take.
Right. And the nice thing is, right, the presentation again is part of the method, that they're together. So when I do like a drawing duplication, which is pretty much self-working now, and it only needs one aspect of that method. For instance, for that, I might play a game of word dissociation. So theoretically, you've already got like a built-in presentation, is the justification, right? So for instance, you might get them to jump off to random dissociated images or words, and then you can turn to someone in the audience, and this was a Peter Turner like edition that he gave me, where you can say, based on the fact that he's just got to the word rainbow, is there any way you feel you could backtrack from that word to what this person's original thought is? And they go no, and you can even have them guess, and of course they're going to get it completely wrong, but you know what it is, and then you can do like a drawing reproduction presentation, or just reveal it. So it kind of, it's sort of built in, right? Presentationally, and I think that it lends itself. There is some process, like what you see there is the process essentially. So of course there's compromise, there's some process, but the way I get around that is, if it's something personal like a name, then I would have them think of characteristics or random words, and if they struggle with characteristics, I still just plow through it as if like theoretically I'm picking up on things subconsciously anyway, right? And they might assume that, you know, they're making associations in the mind that I couldn't connect, but maybe I'm looking inside their head. And what's beautiful, I think, particularly about this method, is the fact that I am literally inside their mind, right? Because this dropped in, like the idea dropped in just before I was going to fall to sleep. Like I got into bed and then it dropped in. And I tried it on myself, and I thought, wow, like, and I think what I've discovered is like a psychological quirk that everyone falls into. I've not had this not work, you know, that everyone falls into this trap of way of thinking, which means I may as well be inside of the head because I know how they're thinking, and I know how they're processing their thoughts, which gives me this big picture that allows this to be almost self-working, me knowing what's in the head. But the beautiful thing is they do all of this subconsciously without them being aware consciously that that's what they're doing. So the reason I wanted to show that method is kind of because I feel like that's kind of the pinnacle of my work so far. And that's not to say that the other stuff is redundant, because each time I've taught certain principles and different tools, you know. But for me, this is the furthest I've pushed it, and the most elegant sort of solution to mentally peaking a word, essentially, you know.
Definitely, it sounds really cool, and it's definitely like a very like unique style. And I just want to jump to one of the questions we got in here earlier. Is do you have any advice for writing magic explanations? You were talking about, or you touched on it earlier, about like that you sometimes just mention stuff that's important that people need to work for a bit. But with the stuff, especially the Propless, there's a lot of process and procedure. Do you have any advice for writing that out?
Yeah, I mean, I think keep it simple. Sort of, I mean, I had to learn how to write after I left school. Like, I actually, like, my English teacher at school would like fall off a chair if she knew that I was like a published writer, you know, because I was terrible. I would have like sentences that just like went off, like, you know, like full sentences would fill up the whole page. There was no structure, so I had to I had like extra tuition when I went to art school, managed to pass like the basic foundation English, and then it was reading magic books, like reading Kenton and stuff, that I learned how to write, you know. And I can only really write in this textbook's teaching sort of esque, you know, way. So I doubt I'd be able to write a novel or anything like that without learning how to do that. So I try and keep it simple, and I try to break it down, right? So that's how I had to learn how to write in the end, was break ideas down and break them into smaller, you know, like just break it down. And so, for instance, like you might say something one way with a sentence and then say it a different way, for more, so that you're clarifying as you go, you know, and keep it in order. Sometimes I tend to write a little bit out of order, and like in terms of, like, you think, okay, well, you need to tell them about one thing before they get this, right? And that happens, but sometimes it's not there until later on. And again, that's kind of a stylistic thing. So I say reread stuff. But, you know, typically I hope that it's clear, and that's my aim, is to be really clear. But in terms of, like, you know, scripting, I keep it, you know, fairly bare bones, and as well as for explanations, I keep it fairly bare bones, because, you know, the last thing I want to do is sort of come up with like this pseudo-scientific sort of explanation as to why something happens. You know, I prefer mystery, and I prefer to, you know, just sort of say, well, this works. Like I will dip into that, like psychologically, this is what's happening, but I don't want to sort of keep going on and on about, you know, about, like, I like to expand it in the correct places, if that makes any sense. What was I going to say? Like, it's gone now.
Don't write that in the book, in the instructions. What was I going to say? It's gone now. Doesn't matter. Anyway.
Yeah, I feel like nowadays I have to like write stuff as I'm speaking sometimes, because I just, you know, I don't know if it's an age thing or whether I'm burning myself out a little bit. You know, like last week, not so much this week, but I was I was thinking again about Propless date of birth, and I've got a version with cards, which is cool. So it's like, you know, I tend to get fall into sort of holes of just being obsessed with something for weeks on end sometimes. And my friend Ross Bartels, he's great because he's a great soundboard and a great thinker himself. So, you know, sometimes he'll text me or I'll text him, "Are you up?" It's like, "Yeah, I shouldn't be." It's like 3 a.m, and then that's it. We're just away then, just like back and forth and stuff. So I don't know whether, you know, I can't really blame that. I can't use that as an excuse for this week why things come out of my head, but you know,
it's just a creative process. Myself and Dave can be like that as well. If I'm working on a stunt or he's working on something for a stage show or vice versa, and it doesn't matter what time it is. It could be, if it comes into your head at that point, you're like, well, I have to talk to somebody about it. You know, and someone
you get
your
really
girlfriend
excited.
or your wife or whatever. At some point, it's just like, just go to bed. Like, what the fuck? I mean, it's a card trick. Stop. You know what I mean?
Right. But for us, it's so important, isn't it? It's like, but you get so excited because it's like, wow, I've just found a way to do something. And it's like, you know, you can't wait to, like, I remember I phoned Pete Turner when this word thing dropped in. Like, I wrote a note on my phone, and then, you know, I remember waking up and smiling because I remembered that I'd done this thing. And rang Pete the next day, and I always know that he thinks something's good because it's the only time he just goes quiet. Like he starts, you can hear his mind starting to work, and then he go, "Oh, why don't you do this?" You know, and so that's kind of my seal of approval from him, because, you know, it's great that I have soundboards, and, you know, like we tell each other if something we think needs changing, stylistically we're quite different. So criticism's really useful and really great, and I always try and refine things, you know, especially more like over the past 3 or 4 years. Like, you know, I feel like, you know, something has to be really right before I release it, and that was just, you know, like how I was, like naivety from the past maybe, but now it's really honed and really refined to where I want it. So it's helpful having, you know, friends and people in the industry that I can soundboard and go back and forth with.
Honest ones as well is great. You don't want people who are just going to tell you everything's wonderful. You want people occasionally to be like, "That's stupid." Like, just
right. I mean, there's one thing that I tipped in another interview, so I can tip it here. And I'll be quick because I don't really want to go over old ground, if that makes sense. So and this was one of those ideas where, you know, I had to ring a friend. It was Adrian Loken, and I says, have I finally lost it? Have I gone crazy, or is this actually good? And he actually gave me a bit that made it really good. So what I was doing was I wanted a peak, and in the past I've always thought, well, the bit that people don't teach you is how to get the peak, right? So like you would bring it into your gaze or justify the gaze. So there was always this moment of like, oh, the technique's great, but you have to still look at it, right? So I wanted to build in, like, psychologically, a moment where I could get a peak, and I came up with something called the Dragon Peak, which is cool. So that does that. Like, I'm actually peaking it, and there's no heat on it because of the psychology, right? But there's this other quicker way that I did, which I've realized by doing it is really strong, and it shouldn't. It's completely counterintuitive how this is so falling. But I think it's because the psychology is right and your attitude is right. So there's nothing to find, right? There's no magician's guilt. You just do it. So you know, and the psychology is that you'd be crazy to do what they would have to assume the method was if they were trying to work it out, trying to work it out. So what happens is, let's say I like get a card that they can write on, and I always have cards on me, and I justify these. You know, I might say I use them a similar way a psychic would, as a way to carry on 52 different symbols. As I show them, they're all different. So that kind of gets rid of the notion that I might do sleight of hand or be like other magicians, right? And it also suggests I might be psychic without saying I am. So that's how I justify a deck of cards. And I don't do anything fancy with it, like fan moves or anything like this, because and my shuffles will be, you know, a little bit sloppy, just to get away from that notion that I've honed any sort of skill-based sleight of hand. Anyway, so I'd have a card, and so like you can have space in the middle, right? So that they write a name or something there, right? So then this gets shuffled back into the deck. And it's just a false shuffle onto the face. So what's cool here is, right, I just go, so there's loads of different like names and different information scribbled on the deck. You didn't write Steve, did you? And I just go like that and show them it and put it down, right? So it's on the bottom, right? So what happens is I literally just nudge it over, which isn't really a move or anything, even if you need to do that. Like I just nudge it over so that it's kind of, I don't know what the best way. So it's at an angle. So it just leaves this misindex. It's weird because the camera's back to front on this. So that gets pushed over, and I just miscall the name. So I was trying to miscall the card, but then Adrian Loken said, "Oh, miscall the name," right? Which I thought was beautiful because it's just better. So now everything happens naturally, right? I'm not doing a move. I'm not trying to hide anything, and this is part of attitude and correct performance when it comes to mentalism, and to get rid of that magician's guilt as well. So I just literally just take the deck, right? And what happens is naturally, my fingers are just covering the relevant stuff, right? Because if that's got a name there, it's in motion anyway. So this is covering it enough for them to not really see it. And it's going to be upside down anyway, from their point of view, and to the side. And they see this misindex, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got all of this going on, but because I've miscalled it, right? I would have to be crazy for that to be their card and me to be looking at it and then show them it to get away with it, right? So because outwardly it looks like I'm just, oh, that's a different name. So you're happy that that's lost somewhere else in the deck. So it's almost as if I'm just checking it's not on the bottom, because that would mean I could see it, right?
Yeah.
So that means it must be somewhere in the deck. It's just a confirmation, and I make sure that I don't rush this. I don't, I don't sort of like try and hide anything or go like this, like covering it with my fingers or like really quickly or jab it in the face. I just really casually, just as if I just mean to show them it and put it down, and that flies, that kills, and it's just like ridiculous because it shouldn't work, right? Yeah. in our minds, but it does, and I've learned how to use this psychology to get away with stuff. I mean, that's really bold, and not everything that I do is bold or as bold as that, but it just goes to show that you can be that bold, which is really nice. And if you wanted to as well, so they don't pick anything up, you could do this with half the deck, so that by the time that you've gone like this, it really now is in the middle of the deck, because it's just gone.
And also, if it's more than likely it's not the only person you perform, so the fact that there's a name on another card, or you could have done another trick, they don't care. It's just another card, another name.
That's it. That's it, and that's just the attitude. But the beautiful thing is you're reading it, and if you struggle to read it, you can go, that writing's bad. Oh, Jessica, you didn't write Jessica. So you can even take longer if you need to. So there's no heat or pressure on being able to get a peek and all the rest of it.
Yeah, that's so good. One of the things people would think about based off that, like you clearly using cards and stuff, but being so known for the propless stuff, what is your like favorite gimmick or prop to use besides like just deck of cards?
Well, obviously the best magic trick ever created is the invisible deck, like in terms of a card gimmick.
Yeah.
I mean, I've played with sort of propless ways to guess cards or force cards, and and I kind of feel like if you've got a deck of cards anyway, it becomes redundant. You may as well just force a card. Like I use the Eddie Fetcher drop force, where they just say stop, because it's like a real nice fair way to, it feels hands off, because by the time they've taken the card, I'm over here and looking away, and then I'm sort of like put it back in the deck and shuffle. It feels hands off, so that works for me. Like for me, if you've got a deck of cards, just do that, right? I know that not everyone wants to carry cards, but like I said, I've justified these, and in performance, I've actually had people late to a table that said, "Oh, magician, sleight of hand," and the people on the table cancel that out for me. They say no, he's not like doing tricks, because I've just one line of scripting. I use these a similar way a psychic would, and the bit about them being 52 different symbols that help me more easily get in tune with you. And you can take that further and say these are visual in nature and all of this, So it's and these kind of, they do have like an esoteric like bent to them as well, like the different seasons, the 52 cards, you know, relate to sort of days of the year and stuff like this. So you can really frame them up however you want. I think they're a real useful tool because it's a really good tool for randomizing things, seemingly, right?
And something everybody recognizes as well, because sometimes you can bring out like tarot or something else and people don't know what they are really, a lot of people.
Right. So personally I use these and I have people write on them and that's it. You know, that's fine. I don't have to carry billets now because I've got these. So that's a stylistic thing, I suppose, again. You know?
Yeah.
But some of the moves...
It does play into the Propless field, though. You know, you're like, I don't even have a pen and paper. I'll just use my cards or whatever. You know, it's got a nice organic feel.
Right. It's one thing that I'll sort of allow myself. But I like I said, like I like the framing. I like how it looks aesthetically and theatrically justified. So I might carry a pen. One thing I tend to do is write on my hand as well, out casually, which I don't know why I started doing that, but it just feels quite organic, and you know, you show them the out. So that's cool. Yeah.
So we have that thing here with the good, the bad, the ugly, which is a segment on the show that we like to go over, which is about a performance that maybe didn't go as well as you planned, maybe with funny consequences, even though some of the ones we've had have been quite dark. But is any like real performance that maybe like haunt your nightmares come to mind?
Yeah, there's one. There's a few. Like we've all got stories, haven't we? One time, like I had Colossal Killer with me. I don't want to like tip anything here, but can I say that? No, probably not. In case I tip it. But something went really wrong with that, and it was my own fault. It was just like I don't think I can say it because it sort of tips the method, right? So a different one, right? There was. I used to work at like a holiday park as a barman, and they had like a open mic night sort of thing, and so I went, okay, I'll try something. So this was when True Mysteries just started, was in the making, like probably 2 years before that. So I hadn't yet discovered what makes it work and why it's why it works the way it does. So I asked for someone from the audience to come up on stage, and I was just going to stick the person to the floor, right? And all it was just telling them to stay there, but making it in the context of what you're doing look hypnotic, and then do another effect with them. And because it was like a family holiday park, one of the mums thought it would be great to get the kid up of like 6 years of age or something. Right? So I just see this kid coming towards me on stage. I thought, don't really want to like try anything with hypnosis with a kid. So I just went, I just thought, fuck it, I'll do it. So I just stopped her like this, just lightly tapped like her toes, said that she couldn't move her legs, right? Like couldn't, like I said that her feet were stuck, right? And then did this other thing, which was like a mind reading bit, and got that to hit. And then I said, so everything's back to normal now. How did that feel? And I think, I can't remember what she said now, but something about her legs feel really like bad or something, not bad. I can't remember what she said now, but it just made me like worry in the moment. Like, and of course you should never look like you're panicking, because you don't want them to think that you can't undo whatever supposed hypnotic control you have over them, right? Or like, so I didn't panic, and I made sure, I think she said, oh, my legs feel weird, right? And I says, no, it's fine. Everything will be back to normal, even better than before, on the count of three. And I did the proper thing to get her out of it. But I just remember thinking, I didn't even want to perform to like a child. And now, potentially I've got to like saying there's something wrong with her legs, which was just like, which was too much for me. I was just like, no, not going near children again, unless it's with balloon animals or something daft.
Doing mentalism with kids is always terrifying. It's a weird moment.
Yeah. There's another one
as well.
Yeah. Like I did this. What was it? It's like a sports day presentation thing. So that was it. So I went there one year, did great, right? Apart from like, you know, sometimes the kids would like be like crunching up the cards and stuff, so I had to like use real strong like wonder words. Like I'd be like, you know, so I'll place your card down and, you know, place your finger on top of it. It's like all this language to sort of make sure they didn't just turn it over or, you know, or scrunch it up and the card and stuff like that. So I got away, that was cool, got away with all that. And then I went back the next year, right? And they used to get the students to book the acts, right? So the guy who booked me the year before, his friend or someone in the year lower had booked me again. And it was like, okay, great. But he had started learning magic all that year. For all that year, he was like, right, I'm going to learn how this works. And he's like following me around every table, just going, oh, you're doing this, you do it. So in the end, I just went, do you know what? I'm just going to do hardcore stuff now. Like I just did burglar stuff for the rest of the night, and like walking across the room and having people like choose a card and then like almost like shuffle tracking and like just amusing myself. Of course, I like did it in between things that would, you know, because you still have a job to do to impress. But whenever he was like he didn't follow me everywhere, but I think 2 or 3 occasions he was like in there and sort of telling. So I just did stuff that even like I shouldn't be able to do, you know, and managed to get that to play and pulled it off. So that was fun.
Definitely. Oh, there's always those kids at gigs, especially if you do a wedding or something. There's always the one kid who's like, "Oh, you're doing the double lift, or you're doing the thing." And you're like, thanks, kid. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So sometimes, you know, you just sort of let them in on it, and it's like, you know, like keep it a secret, you know, and I'll tell you more or something. Like there's ways to, like sometimes I've like with an ambitious card, I've sort of like camera angles, hard work, and I've sort of like shown someone the so I've shown them the indifferent card. I've just been like, so the 9 of hearts, right? And they just nod, you know, because you know that if they know a little bit about magic or they've already maybe caught you somehow because they like looked under the deck at you just let them in on it just enough just to be like, oh, he's making me sort of special or stood out, so that they're not going to like tip to everyone else. That's the hope anyway. But it's great because you just get in these positions where you just like, so the 9 of hearts and you nod like the Gary Kurtz thing. And it's and that like helps floor people as well. So like being bold can sometimes be sort of those moments where you're thinking on your feet and you're creating something out of nothing, really, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So we just crossed the hour there. There's one question in from things to finish up. So we have a question there from Jordan, which is, what is your most proud creation? I think that's the one you've just recently created. And has quarantine helped you with creativity, or did you find it more hindering?
I kind of go through stages of creativity. So like I might have like a few months where I don't really do anything, and then focused sort of few months where I become obsessed with something sometimes. So to be honest with you, it didn't. I don't think it helped the creativity because of everything. But maybe it did in a way, because at one point I was just like, you know what, I've got to do something. Like I've got to, you know, because it looked like business and stuff was sort of just grinding to a halt. So that's what makes me the happiest, I think, is when I'm creating. So, and I like being off in my own world. It's like, you know, I just go into my own world, which is great. But like my girlfriend, when she first met me, she just had to realize that that's what I do sometimes, and it wasn't her or there wasn't a problem. And sometimes I just go off and that's it, you know. So yeah, I think it I wouldn't say it helped, but it was kind of like I had to do it because that's what keeps me going. That's what punctuates my life, and that's what I sort of get up for and live for, I suppose, is magic and being able to create stuff. Because when I discover something, I'm just as excited about it as hopefully the people that I show it to. So that's what keeps me going in general. Like I said before, I think Sui Generis is for me like my proudest moment or one of them. But it's typically what I'm working on currently that I'm most into. Like I'm into this Propless Day of Birth now, I mean, I've got a version of cards that I love because you don't have to like get them to take cards out and peek anything or use marked cards. There's no like astrological number that like process. It's real quick. So you just, well, I can't say, can I? But one card force allows you to get the exact date of birth and star sign just off one card force, and the deck can go away. And it's, you know, obviously you present it in a routine. And for me, that beats all the others that I've seen. Like for me, because it's so quick, and on purpose, I needed it to be streamlined. And I have got a Propless way. In fact, I've got like 6 different ways. But all last week, it was kind of like not being happy with each one because it wasn't refined enough or quick enough to do, or you know. But I think I've got it now. I've got like a version with the deck, and I've got a Propless version that it's real quick. So that's cool. So that's what I'm most turned on at the moment with. I think like a couple of weeks ago, it was my card at any number that I released as well, because it's a complete hands-off shuffled deck where they check through the deck, and then and this I think like the reason I want to mention this quick is because it shows kind of my style and approach. Like for me, this fits me, so this is what I will perform, right? Yeah. So you start off with like, you know, you say I want to show you the difference between intuition and just guessing. So they would guess like a card and be wrong in a position, and then the position that they named with their intuition has the right card. But that's after they've shuffled and checked through the deck that they're all different, and you never touch the deck. Like, you know, that's it. You hand them the deck and then that's it. So for me, making stuff hands off and stuff like this, because I've got like a thought of card, no key, which is like a shuffled hands off deck. And, you know, Peter Turner, he's said in the past, like, oh, you know, why are you doing that? You could just do like the classic sort of stop force or whatever, something else, you know, doesn't have to be hands off. It's like, but he did say, well, you know, it'd be great for like across the room, and, you know, so you can build it presentation that way. But for me, the ultimate was, well, hands off. Let's make it as impossible as you can, right? It might not be necessary because people are still impressed by what you do. But again, I'm trying to push things where they've never been before. So, you know, that's kind of what I always try to do. Not to say that that's the be all and end all, and it probably won't end up being pushed to its furthest extreme into purely Propless, because I still think it's useful to combine the two, the classic and the Propless. And just for anyone who's interested, the products are on my website that I've got available at the moment. And if you want anything that that you've heard about, then the best thing to do is contact me if you can't find something on the site. So hopefully that was all right to just plug that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just going to ask you for the plug. So yeah, definitely go to the website. I still go back to True Mysteries on a regular basis just to
great
go over some stuff, because I love that style of the hypnosis stuff. Definitely. So definitely check out Fraser online, and again, definitely highly recommend the products. And also go to deceivereality.com. So we have some Murphy's Magic products there as well. So definitely go check that out, and all the podcasts, all the old podcasts are up there too. Cool. And follow Steve on Instagram, Fraser, and myself. That would be great. Appreciate it. So definitely thanks everyone, and thanks again, Fraser. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, man.
We'll be back again in 2 weeks, I think, and then we've 2 more this month. So looking forward to them, and we'll talk to everyone again soon. Thank you again, and we'll see you.